Welcome to the Folktale Project. This is Dan Scholz. And today we have a story from the Yakut. It's a Jewish story, a fairy tale from Aunt Naomi's Jewish fairy stories. It's a story of how a good and pious family makes good with what's given to him by the prophet Elijah. This is The Coins of Elijah, or A Hidden Treasure Well Used. Once upon a time, there was a really pious man who was ever ready to assist all who needed his help. Prosperity and happiness smiled upon him. Year in and year out, all went well with him and his dear ones. Then all of a sudden, a change took place. The business which he carried on proved to be gradually showing a loss instead of a former profit. Trade began to dwindle, the regular customers died or moved away, bad debts increased, and eventually the entire fortune of the good man was lost. In order to provide for the daily needs of his wife and children, he worked in the fields as a laborer paid by the day. The day's work was long and hard, but a good heart and a willing spirit enabled him to overcome all difficulties. He even spared a coin of his wages to help those in a worse plight than he found himself. Now it happened one day, whilst he was engaging in plowing a field, that a stranger approached and greeted him, saying, "Peace be to thee, and to all thy house." He replied, "Peace be also to thee and thine." The stranger then continued, "Friend, I am come to tell thee that thou art destined to regain thy fortune and to live in affluence for a period of 6 years during thy life here on earth. It is thine to choose when this period shall begin. Shall it be now or later in life?" Astonished at the strange words which he had heard, the laborer looked at his companion to see if he was dreaming. "Good stranger," he cried, "art thou a prophet or a magician that thou speakest in this wise? I fear thou art a poor man, even as I am. Go thy way in peace, for I cannot help thee today, for I am penniless at the moment. I should be happy to give thee a fee for thy happy forecast, but I cannot give what I have not got. Go in peace, and may heaven send thee help." The stranger went away, and the laborer resumed his work without thinking any more of the strange conversation which he had just had. After a short interval, the stranger returned and repeated the offer, only to be refused. When, however, for the third time he urged the unwilling laborer to accept his gift by believing in the proffered promise, the poor toiler, weary of his hard daily struggle in the fields, at last consented to consult his wife before coming to a decision. A glimmer of hope in the possibility of the promise had arisen in his heart. "Perhaps after all," he thought, "kind Providence has sent this messenger to help me in my dire distress, and that now the poverty which has harassed me and my dear ones will be replaced by wealth and prosperity." He ran home as quickly as his legs would carry him and told his wife all that had transpired. He emphasized the insistence displayed by the stranger. He said to his wife, "Assuming that the stranger is speaking the truth and that I am to be rich for a period of 6 years, when do you advise me to choose our time of prosperity, now or later in life?" After a moment's consideration, she cried, "Now, now!" Her husband returned to the field without further delay and found the stranger awaiting his decision. When the laborer told him his wish to enjoy there and then the promised wealth and prosperity, the stranger opened his purse and took out 2 pieces of silver. "Here, my friend," he said, "take these 2 coins and return them to me 6 years hence, when I shall call on thee. Do not forget I shall require my money to be restored to me when I come to demand it." After the laborer had taken the coins, he thanked his benefactor and promised to return the gift as arranged. In a second the stranger had disappeared. No trace of the direction he had taken was discerned by the laborer, who also recalled that the stranger had come upon him all of a sudden. "Very strange," he said. "There is some mystery about this stranger. He seems to come from nowhere and return to the same place." No sooner had the laborer placed the coins in his pocket than he perceived a sudden change coming over him. He no longer felt the same man. His poverty and sorrow fled away from him, and a new feeling of contentment and security arose in his heart. He bowed his head in gratitude and thanked God for his manifold mercies. Meanwhile, wonderful events were occurring in his home. His eldest son was turning the soil in the garden at the back of their house when he saw gold glittering in the sunlight. He dug deeper and deeper and continued to find the precious metal. In fact, There was evidently a treasure which had been lying hidden there all the years of their poverty. The young man cried aloud in his joy. His mother and her other sons came to see what was amiss. As soon as she saw what was happening, she sent her youngest son to his father. She said, "Do not fail to tell him that God has given back our fortune." Before the door of their house, however, stood the father. In a moment he was with his wife and children, and uniting with them gave thanks to him who giveth and taketh away. The pious man and his virtuous wife resolved to make good use of their wealth as long as it was entrusted to their care. They were very happy because they were now in a position to help the poor, who so sorely needed their assistance. The wife said to her good husband, "My dear, we must not forget that our prosperity will not last forever. We are to be rich for 6 years only. Let us during this period feed the hungry, clothe the naked, and assist the needy. We shall always have the satisfaction of knowing that we made other people happy during the years of our good fortune. We shall be happy in realizing that we have made good use of our trust." "Verily," he said, "the law of kindness is on thy tongue." Not a day passed without an occasion offering itself to these good people to bestow their wealth upon those less fortunate than themselves. They did not fail in seizing every opportunity of doing an act of charity and kindness. The youngest son was told by his mother to keep an account of their own expenses and also an account of the money given in alms. The 6 years passed like a dream. One day the expected benefactor came to their house, and after receiving a warm welcome, turned to his host and said, "The 6 years have passed, and I have come to ask thee to return my money." The pious man exclaimed, "Dear friend, thy demand is quite fair and just, yet stay. I accepted thy gift only after I had consulted my wife, and now, before I repay my debt, I must again ask her advice." Whereupon he turned to his wife, who was present, and said to her, "Beloved wife, please advise me on how I am to repay our debt to our generous benefactor here." "Let me," she cried, "settle accounts with him." Turning to him, she said, "I will show thee how we have spent the fortune entrusted to our care through thy kindness. Behold the account books." The kind stranger looked with deep interest in the long lists recording the money spent in charity. "You have indeed," he cried, "spent plenty of money. But good sir," she added, "if thou dost believe for a moment that thy money might be entrusted to better guardians, take away thy gift. If, on the other hand, thou art satisfied with the manner in which we have used the wealth placed in our care, then let us continue to hold our trust." Thereupon the stranger, who was Elijah the prophet, blessed the good couple and bade them enjoy the wealth they knew so well how to use. In a moment, the prophet had departed, and the happy couple kept the coins and bequeathed them to their eldest son as a family heirloom. And that is the story of the coins of Elijah, from Jewish Fairy Stories, translated by Gerald Friedlander. These are the stories that we have read some of. They're listed as by Aunt Naomi. It's such a lovely story, a story of making good with what one is given, something we can all be reminded of. This is Dan Scholz for the Folktale Project. Don't forget that you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere that you like to get your podcasts. You can follow us on Instagram and Threads at Folktale Project. If you'd like to help support the project, you can head over to patreon.com/folktaleproject, or you could always just share the stories with someone you love. I do appreciate that. As always, thank you so much for listening.